underway, news from ITN.
Bush tells Thatcher, "We still have a special relationship." The tubes at the centre of the Iraq supergun controversy. Soviets say we killed 15,000 Polish officers during the war. And 2 more prisoners give themselves up at Strangeways. Good evening. President Bush says the Americans still have a special relationship with Britain, and he has tremendous respect for Mrs. Thatcher. The President was speaking on his plane to the Bermuda summit with the Prime Minister. Their talks are now underway on East-West relations and the role of the new Germany.
Mr. Bush was greeted by Mrs. Thatcher and Bermuda's Governor, Sir Desmond Langley, on the lawn of Government House. It was friendly, but with none of the hugs and kisses which characterised the Thatcher-Reagan partnership. The band of the Bermuda Regiment struck up the Stars and Stripes. And Mr. Bush then inspected a guard of honour, offering a civilian salute as he passed the Union Jack. Earlier, on board his personal jet, he spoke about his approach to Britain.
But we've got a special relationship with the UK. We always have. I feel I have a very frank and open relationship with Margaret Thatcher, for whom I have tremendous respect.
And on possible differences over German unity.
Then it's important we know that, and important that I explain to her as clearly as I can U.S. policy, and then things have a way of coming together.
There may even be a way out of the previously vexed question of modernized nuclear weapons on German soil.
Our position is that this matter is really a collective decision for NATO still, and obviously with a lot of concern for how Germany will treat this.
It's therefore clear this is going to be more than a cosy exchange of views. Both leaders will seek to flesh out a common approach to the development of NATO in the context of the new balance of power in Europe. They are likely to remain apart on the development of the European community, which Mr. Bush is a keen supporter of, whereas Mrs. Thatcher remains cautious about monetary union and collective foreign policy. It will all take place in the context of the special relationship as redefined by George Bush. For Mr. Bush, the special relationship means agreement on many things, but also the ability to talk tough on areas of disagreement. It appears Germany may remain a problem. Alistair Stewart, ITN, Bermuda.
The cylinders at the centre of the Iraq supergun controversy were put on show today on Teesside, and the company who manufactured them released a video of the tubes being made. They say 44 of them, the bulk of the order, have already been delivered to Iraq after being cleared by customs and excise.
Customs officials this morning showed journalists what they believe to be the world's biggest gun barrel. They unpacked some of the sections from wooden crates, explaining as they did so how the pieces should be joined together. Their identities being protected for security reasons.
That's the big one on there, on the load on there, you know. That is 44 ton. They gradually go up. This is 7 ton. I think that one's 11 ton. You know, that one's 12 ton. They gradually go up, and one's 20 ton. And the other one's 44 ton.
So the biggest is 44?
Yeah.
And the smallest is about 7?
Yeah, they're all about 5 meters long.
Customs officials remain convinced that they have in their possession bits of a 140-ton gun, capable of firing nuclear and chemical shells hundreds of miles from its smooth inner bore. But its makers, Sheffield Forge Masters, say if it is a gun, the order to make it was the biggest con job in the history of arms manufacture. And today they confirmed they've already shipped similar pieces to Iraq.
We had 2 contracts for tube assemblies, each of 26 tubes, which we understood were to be joined together. If you take each of those 2 assemblies and stick them together, they add up to a length of 156 meters, not 40 meters, as has been banded in the press. Now, of those total 52 tubes, 44 of them have already left the country, and those that have been impounded are just the last 8. Now, as far as we're concerned, there's been speculation as to anyone could possibly make a gun at 40 meters. I mean, they might like to speculate as to how they could do one at 156 meters.
The manufacturers today also issued this corporate video, which they say was made while the tubes were in production. Throughout their commentary, recorded for internal use only, they refer to them as commercial pipework.
This is one example of the 52 tubes made by Forgemasters Engineering Limited for the Ministry of Industry in Iraq.
Forgemasters say their documentation shows they received clearance from the Department of Trade and Industry to make them, and they hope this video shows they acted in good faith. It charts the progress of the tubes along the production line, right from the furnace through to the finished product. But it's only served to intensify the debate about the pipes, with experts on both sides lining up with opposing views. A new theory emerging today is that the pipes could be sections of a gas-oil separator, something like this. One retired engineering surveyor, who Forgemasters say came to them with the theory, says he's certain that's what they are.
Sections of gas-oil separators. Separators of this design have been manufactured, or designed and manufactured by British engineers and companies since the mid-1930s.
Meanwhile, customs officials are continuing their investigations to establish whether anyone knowingly broke the law.
Customs officials say the cylinders, which could have formed part of a massive gun, may have been designed by a world expert on ballistics, Dr. Gerald Bull. He was murdered in Brussels last month. It's thought he had close contacts with the Iraqis. The gun's specifications are detailed in a technical manual co-authored by Dr. Bull.
Dr. Gerald Bull was acknowledged as one of the world's leading ballistic experts. Success came early. At 22, he was the youngest PhD to graduate from Toronto University. He then worked on some of the top defence contracts and the United States. His vision that launched HARP, the cannon, which could send probes into space for a fraction of the cost of a rocket. Bull turned his back on the West after being jailed in 1980 for selling arms to South Africa. He worked for a number of foreign governments after that, some in the Middle East. Last month, he was shot dead outside his flat in Brussels. Relatives said he feared an attack by the Israeli Secret Service. In one of his manuals, Bull details plans for a weapon identical to the gun Iraq is now said to be building.
There you can see all the various sections as they were found, exactly as they were found at Teesside. I would suggest that they would put it underground, not as shown here in this diagram, because as it's shown, it would be an immediate target for retaliatory strikes. They would put it underground with just the muzzle showing above ground. They would then use it to deliver payloads of high explosive or chemical to city-sized targets. And they would be able to carry on doing this every half hour or every hour.
Bull had tried to do business in Britain before. He's believed to have tried to buy a factory in Ulster last year, but the government refused permission because of his Iraqi connections.
The Soviet Union has admitted that the massacre of up to 15,000 Polish officers at Katyń during the war was carried out by Stalin's secret police. Up to now, the Kremlin has always blamed the Nazis for the killings. Today, the TASS news agency expressed deepest regret for the evil deed in Katyn Wood outside Smolensk.
For years, Russians have visited Katyn Forest, convinced that the 15,000 Polish officers shot and buried here were killed by the Nazis. Today, there was disbelief at the news that the truth is very different. After a 3-year investigation, documents have been found that trace the last days of men captured in the first days of the war. They were the cream of the Polish army, their capture a coup for the Russians. 4 years later, their mass graves were discovered at Katyn. The Poles blamed the Russians the Nazis. Today, the Soviet authorities told the true story, that in 1940, 15,000 Polish prisoners of war were brought to this spot and murdered, not by the Nazis, but by the Soviet NKVD secret police, the forerunners of the KGB. It was, said the announcement, one of Stalin's worst excesses. The discovery of this 50-year lie has brought relief to locals. There were rumors for years that the Nazis didn't do it, he says, but the people who knew the truth were too scared to speak out. It's good to admit our guilt now, he says. It was wrong to have lied for so long. The announcement coincides with the visit to Moscow of the Polish President General Jaruzelski, who says he now hopes relations between the two countries can improve. Moscow has expressed deep regret. Tomorrow he goes to Katyn, where he himself fought as a young officer, and he'll lay flowers, knowing that one of the last mysteries and crimes of the Second World War has now been solved. Bill Neely, ITN, Katyń in the Soviet Union.
In Poland, the Solidarity leader Mr. Lech Wałęsa said an apology from the Soviet Union wasn't enough. He said Katyń was a crime even more heinous than the Hitler crimes and the killers should be brought to justice. Members of the Polish community here say compensation should be paid.
They should apologize for the crime. They should compensate the people that are still living and their families. And also they should allow the people, the children of those that been murdered in Katyń, quite a few of those are still in Russia. And they're not enjoying the freedom as you and I.
2 more inmates involved in the Strangeways prison siege have surrendered. It's understood that less than 13 are still inside. The prison authorities insist that they still want to end the protest peacefully through negotiation.
Prison negotiators wanted to begin their talks early, and a deafening dawn chorus shook the inmates awake. Several prisoners had announced they would come down today. Others were warning the siege would go on. In an effort to try and bridge the gap between them, the prison negotiators spent the entire morning talking to the hardcore men on the roof. Some of the rioters had requested family reunions in their terms of surrender, and relatives were allowed inside the nearby visitor centre. Hopes were raised of a breakthrough when the mother of ringleader Paul Taylor arrived at the prison, but she was not allowed to speak to her son. Shortly before midday, officers clad in riot gear assembled in force within the prison grounds. The authorities had seen the gestures of defiance, including one man with a cigar, and realized this was not the day for a mass surrender. Negotiators persevered with individual prisoners, and at 12 today, another man gave up and was taken back into custody. He was transferred to another prison after first being questioned and allowed food and a shower. 2 hours later, another success as a second man gave in and followed a similar path. But this afternoon, all talks collapsed, and many of those still holding out returned to the roof with their leader, Paul Taylor. The authorities have said the rioters reneged on agreements they made between themselves and the negotiators, and as a result, the dialogue and progress has now been stalled.
Well, Colin Baker is also at Strangeways, where there have been some developments. Colin, what's happening?
Well, what I can tell you, Sue, is that for the first time after 13 days, the exclusion zone for aircraft over the prison, operating since the siege started a week last Sunday, has suddenly been lifted. We don't know why, but obviously for a moment it increased speculation that something was about to break.
Can we actually see from the helicopters?
Well, these are the first live pictures, the closest pictures that you've seen yet. A short time ago, the prisoners were on the end of A wing, a small group of them. If the picture steadies, you will see on the corner of B wing, there's a small group of about 2 or 3. They've been spending most of their time shouting at members of the public. Of course, when they do that, the police and the prison authorities inside turn on loud sirens to drown those remarks out.
Colin, thank you very much. We'll come back to that story, of course, if we get any more. 3 Britons have died after their single-engine plane crashed over Normandy in northern France. One report says the light aircraft exploded in mid-air over the town of Bayeux. The 46-year-old pilot of the private plane was amongst the dead. Debris from the aircraft landed on houses and gardens around Bayeux. No one on the ground was injured. It's not yet known what caused the accident. Main news tonight, summit talks between Mrs. Thatcher and President Bush have started in Bermuda, with the President saying the special relationship is alive and well. British officials describe the talks as very relaxed, enjoyable and useful. The Sheffield firm at the centre of the Iraq supergun controversy says the bulk of the cylinder order is already in Iraq after being cleared by customs. The Soviet news agency TASS has expressed deepest regret for the killing of 15,000 Polish soldiers at Katyń by the Soviet secret police during the Second World War. And less than 13 prisoners remain inside Manchester's Strangeways prison after 2 more inmates gave themselves up today. Well, that's the news at 5:40. We're back at 9 o'clock this evening. Have a good evening.
Well, more unsettled weather to come right through the holiday weekend. Let's take a look earlier on today and see what things look like. Band of cloud and rain across the southeast. In fact, gave a little bit of snow on the Chilterns during this afternoon. In the bulk of the country, a lot of showers. Many of these showers were quite heavy. But behind me here on this side, the beginnings of more rain, and that's due tomorrow. But during the night tonight, most places will become dry. The heavy rain will clear away from the eastern side. But later on in the night, further cloud and outbreaks of rain coming in across Ireland and into western Scotland. But over many eastern and central parts of the country, it'll clear, with the skies clear and light winds, fog and frost becoming a bit of a problem. So if you are planning a journey tomorrow morning, add a little extra time to it. Through tomorrow, the rain in the west continuing to work its way across into Scotland and many western parts of England and Wales. By the end of the morning, central and eastern areas holding on to some fine dry weather for a while, but as we go through the afternoon, the rain continuing on its way eastward, some of it quite heavy, particularly in the north, to be followed by much brighter weather with some fairly brisk and blustery showers. Temperatures tomorrow, well, nothing great, much like today's, 8 to 12 at best. I would think that's about 46 to 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 54 Fahrenheit, and quite a stiff west to southwesterly wind developing, especially in the north later in the day. Through Sunday then, the rain should have cleared away and for most places quite bright, with a fair number of showers. The worst of the showers across the north and down the western side of the country, and anywhere from about North Wales northwards, you'll be seeing some sleet and on the high ground some snow. Temperatures on Sunday, not too great again, 9 to 11, few degrees either side of 50 Fahrenheit, and very, very windy, especially in the northwest, where you're likely to see at least gale force. That's it from me. Here's the weekend summary.
A Good Friday.